You are watching the World 24/7 on the NDTV network. I'm Parmeshwar Bava. Here's your daily dose of the top stories from around the world. In Moscow, Prime Minister Modi calls Russia India's all-weather friend, trusted ally, and hails Putin's leadership. He has now arrived in Vienna from Moscow. During this trip, the two nations will explore ways to further deepen their bilateral relationship and closer cooperation on the many geopolitical challenges. The world's most formidable military alliance began a three-day meeting in Washington, D.C., ostensibly to strengthen partnership on its 75th anniversary and pledge greater support to Ukraine in its war with Russia. At the same time, all eyes are on the host, US President Joe Biden, whose re-election bid is in jeopardy on the growing perception that he is aging rapidly. Bangladesh's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is in China to attract investments. She signed 16 MOUs at a trade summit in Beijing on Tuesday, and Sheikh Hasina will meet Xi Jinping today before concluding her trip. British lawmakers were sworn in as Parliament convened for the first time since British Prime Minister Keir Starmer won a large majority in last week's election. As per custom, the longest-serving lawmaker, Sir Edward Ley, was sworn in as the so-called father of the House, followed by Prime Minister Keir Starmer, members of his new cabinet, and the shadow cabinet. Senior White House advisors for more than a year have aggressively stage-managed US President Biden's schedule, movements, and personal interactions as they sought to minimize signs of how age has taken a toll on the oldest president in US history. As Biden's stumbles become increasingly obvious, the White House fights back against doubts on Biden's mental fitness. Well, a big focus as Russian President Vladimir Putin accepted Prime Minister Narendra Modi's request for early discharge of Indians hired as security helpers and forced to fight alongside the Russian army against Ukraine. It has emerged that Moscow is offering a compensation package and citizenship to the families of the deceased. Now, from a private dinner to some personal time to signing crucial deals on defense, security, and the economy, here's a wrap of the key takeaways from Mr. Modi's 26-hour touchdown with his all-weather friend, the chief of Russia, Vladimir Putin.
The death of the innocents yesterday, Prime Minister was very clear and categorical in expressing his concern and regret at the loss of these innocent lives, including in particular the children yesterday. And you would have seen that I'm not trying to paraphrase Prime Minister's remark because he said it openly. He clearly said, roughly translated into English, that the solution to this conflict is not to be found on the battlefield. While we do not have the precise indication of the specific numbers, we expect or anticipate them to be roughly between 35 to 50, a total number of Indian nationals, out of which 10 Indian nationals we have managed to bring them back to India. Prime Minister raised this issue very strongly, that we should try and get back all Indian nationals back to India as early as possible. The two systems will work on it and see how exactly and how expeditiously we can get them back into the country.
While the war in Ukraine intensified as Moscow continued its assault on Kiev, the India-Russia bonhomie was on full display as Prime Minister Modi concluded his first bilateral visit in his third term. From an informal dinner and tour of Putin's residence to signing crucial deals on economy, defense and security and the discharge of Indians stuck on the war front, the two leaders deepened ties, much to the annoyance of America. Yet, despite this close friendship between Prime Minister Modi and Russian President Putin, India condemned Moscow's strike on a children's hospital which killed over 41 people in Kiev during their bilateral meeting, highlighting the rare dynamic between the two leaders and India's voice in peace talks.
एक्सेलेंसी, एक मित्र के नाते मैंने हमेशा कहा है कि हमारी भावी पीढ़ी के उज्जवल भविष्य के लिए शांति सर्वाधिक आवश्यक है, लेकिन मैं ये भी जानता हूं कि युद्ध के मैदान में समाधान संभव नहीं होते। बम, बंदूक और गोलियों के बीच समाधान और शांति वार्ताएं सफल नहीं होती हैं और हमने वार्ता के माध्यम से ही शांति के रास्ते अपनाने होंगे।
Prime Minister Modi was also conferred with the Order of St. Andrew, Russia's highest civilian honor, as a tribute to the old, deep friendship and mutual trust between India and Russia.
Уважаемый господин премьер-министр, дорогой друг, награждение вас орденом святого апостола Андрея Первозванного отражает искреннюю признательность российской стороны за тот значимый вклад, который вы вносите в укрепление дружбы и взаимопонимания между нашими государствами и народами.
While the key focus of this visit to Moscow remained economic cooperation, with the two leaders vowing to eliminate non-tariff barriers, achieving mutual trade of $100 billion by 2030 and increased trade via the international North-South trade corridor, the meeting also sends a diplomatic signal to the West that India will not bow down to Western pressures and continue to put its interest forward and maintain its multipolar position with its allies. With Disha Bagchi, Bureau Report, NDTV.
But Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky has reacted sharply to Prime Minister Modi's brief visit to Russia and his interaction with Russian President Vladimir Putin. In fact, Ukraine's president has said it is a huge disappointment and a devastating blow to peace efforts to see the leader of the world's largest democracy hug the world's most bloody criminal in Moscow. This on the day Russia had attacked a children's hospital in Kiev. Now, with Russia his first choice for a bilateral visit in his third tenure, Prime Minister Modi broke a tradition that Indian Prime Ministers travel to neighbouring countries on their first standalone visits in a tenure, indicating the importance of the India-Russia partnership. Now, Dr. Swasti Rao, Associate Fellow of the Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defence Studies, joins us on the broadcast for further clarity and a roundup of this entire trip. Thank you so much, Dr. Rao, for joining us. Now, above all, you think Mr. Modi's visit to Russia sent a geopolitical message, given the contrast to another summit in Washington, the NATO summit? I mean, Zelensky evidently is displeased with Mr. Modi and Mr. Putin's meeting.
Well, I mean, Zelensky being, I think we're talking about a couple of things. As far as the diplomatic messaging is concerned, of course, it's a diplomatic messaging because India has been having this very clear communication for a long time with all kinds of its partners that India would operate in strategic autonomy and national interest. And the reason why Prime Minister Modi actually went to Russia to restart the annual summit, etc., were basically all international interests because, you already mentioned it also in your primer that there's been ways to boost trade, for example, smoothen out the rupee-ruble mechanism, and also take into account the fact that there's been this growing trade deficit and what are the ways to reduce that. So I think those, or for that matter, you mentioned getting back the Indians who are stuck in Russia, who land up fighting, and then some of them also land up getting killed. And MEA had taken a very strong view of that. So I think if you look at the outcomes of why the Prime Minister had gone, I think the Prime Minister had gone with a very clear agenda. And of of course, our ties with Russia are important. They are built on, I would say, a lot of historic friendship, etc. But the Ukraine war has also been a major factor in which, the ties have to evolve. And for letting that happen, I think the highest level dialogue is what is required. And that is why the Prime Minister was there. So that's the first part. The second thing is that I've been saying that again and again, that in my opinion, I don't think India really owes an explanation to either Washington or to Moscow or to Brussels, or for that matter to Kyiv, about its actions. I think India has made it very, very clear in the last 2 years that India stands by the path of peace, has been consistently on board with all the 4 major peace summits, the multilateral peace summits, that starting from Copenhagen in Denmark to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, then Malta, and then Switzerland, which was the latest one. And on the other hand, India has also kept its ties with Russia alive and not bowed down to either Western sanctions or anyone. At the same time, this is also signaling to China, because India is also mindful of the growing strategic alignment between Russia and China as a reason of the war. And by doing this, I think this is a situation which is in the best interest of India as well as in the best interest of Russia, because both would like to have a balance in the Eurasian order intact, like we have been doing. Now, one cannot argue, even for a moment, that one can just go about business as always. No, there are so many changes, but that's the nature of world politics and geopolitics, right? It is a very fluid situation. And in that, the purpose of diplomacy is actually to operate in national interest. So I think in that sense, it's very good. There's also been, in terms of signaling to Washington, you see, all these dates have been set in advance. Yes, of course, NATO countries, 32 of them now are meeting in Washington. The major ponderable out there is to be how to Trump-proof, lest somebody like Donald Trump were to come back to as American president. So Trump-proofing of NATO is going to be a major event, out there, major ponderable, as well as all the spade work around when and how Ukraine can become a member of NATO. I honestly feel that is not going to happen, at least not in the summit or a near foreseeable future. But yes, it is more about long-term security assurances and agreements that so many Western partners have entered into Ukraine.
Yes.
So, well, that's a different part. So in terms of signaling, yes, there has been a signaling, but at the same time, it's beyond the signaling, and it's about really understanding, navigating India's
Right,
national
Dr. Rao. Really appreciate you taking time for us and joining us on the broadcast. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Modi arrived in Vienna from Moscow on a 2-day visit to Austria, during which the two nations will explore ways to further deepen their bilateral relationship and closer cooperation on the many geopolitical challenges. Prime Minister Modi was welcomed by Austria's foreign minister at the airport, and it is the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Austria in over 40 years, the last being of Indira Gandhi in 1983. Prime Minister Modi will call on the President of the Republic of Austria and hold talks with the Chancellor today. Mr. Modi and the Chancellor will also address business leaders from India and Austria. But for the detailed plan of action, let's go across to Ghazali for the further details. Ghazali, take us through the key focus areas as well as what's planned for the day for Mr. Modi.
See, after Russia's visit, now Prime Minister Modi has landed in Austria. Now, there are many reasons why this visit is happening. The first, as you mentioned, that this is the first visit of Indian Prime Minister in the last 41 years. Back, I think it was in 1983 when Indira Gandhi was the last Prime Minister to have visited Austria. Now, the second one is that this year also marks the 75 years of diplomatic relations with Austria and India. And this is why this is also very symbolic, very significant that Prime Minister Modi has made this visit or planned this visit to mark the 75th year of its diplomatic relations. So India and Austria had great diplomatic relations since reviving their ties or recognizing it back in 1955 when Prime Minister was Mr. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. And after that, Mr. Modi is making this trip after 41 years since Indira Gandhi visited it. And there are many economic cooperation or ties between India and Austria, which will be the focus area during this visit. So as far as the cultural and historical links are concerned, the historical and cultural exchanges such as the visits of Rabindranath Tagore to Vienna underlying the long-standing cultural relations between the two countries. And also there are Indian diaspora is there in Austria, which the Prime Minister is going to address as he addressed them back in Russia. But more than diaspora or the cultural connect, it's also about the economic ties. Now, we know that the trade amount between India and Vienna has swelled in the last couple of years, and more than technology transfer or exporting other goods from Vienna, India is also looking for a good market in the Europe, and that is why this entire visit is very significant.
As always, Ghazali, thank you so much for joining us with the latest details. Meanwhile, the US and other NATO allies will send Ukraine dozens of air defense systems in the coming months, including at least 4 of the powerful Patriot systems that Kiev has been desperately seeking to help fight off Russian advances in the war, according to a new joint statement. Meanwhile, NATO is deepening its ties to non-member Asia-Pacific countries, signaling the US's desire to counter China in the region. The war in Ukraine remains top NATO's priority list, and the attendance of leaders from Australia, New Zealand, Japan and South Korea at the group summit this week shows how Russia and China present overlapping challenges to a US-led world order. Hosting the summit, by the way, gives Joe Biden a chance to showcase his leadership on the world stage, but it's happening at an awkward time. He is simultaneously dealing with pressure to bow out of the presidential race after his shaky debate performance against Trump raised questions about his ability to do the job for another 4 years.
Today, I'm announcing an historic donation of air defense equipment for Ukraine. The United States, Germany, the Netherlands, Romania, and Italy will provide Ukraine with the equipment for 5 additional strategic air defense systems. And in the coming months, the United States and our partners intend to provide Ukraine with dozens of additional tactical air defense systems. The United States will make sure that when we export critical air defense interceptors, Ukraine goes to the front of the line.
Meanwhile, just a few hours ago, Global Times, which is backed by China's Communist Party, has published an article saying the recent hype over the China threat by Western media ahead of the 3-day NATO summit and accusations of China supporting Russia once again reveal the US's and NATO's intentions to extend their influence into the Asia-Pacific region for geopolitical gain. But all eyes are on Washington as the US and other NATO allies have agreed to send Ukraine dozens of air defense systems. This has been disclosed in the latest joint agreement. Welcome back. NATO is deepening its ties to non-member Asia-Pacific countries, signaling the United States' desire to counter China in the region. The war in Ukraine remains atop NATO's priority list, and the attendance of leaders like from Australia, New Zealand, Japan and South Korea at the group summit this week shows how Russia and China present overlapping challenges to a US-led world order. Hosting the summit, by the way, gives Joe Biden a chance to showcase his leadership on the world stage. But you know, it's happening at an awkward time. He is simultaneously dealing with pressure to bow out of the presidential race after his shaky debate performance against Trump raised questions about his ability to do the job for another 4 years. We have with us foreign policy lecturer and analyst from Johns Hopkins University, Edward P. Joseph, on the broadcast for further clarity. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. You know, many analysts I'm speaking to seem to echo the belief that this year's NATO summit is outwardly tough but inwardly brittle. The summit aims to project unity and shared interests, but outwardly, but internally, you think there are increasing anxieties and worries among member countries?
I can tell you and speak quite confidently with you and your viewers this evening, as I'm just coming from a special summit event with the foreign policy chief of the European Union. That is what should be, in most situations, would be the competing entity to the US-led NATO alliance. And I just heard High Commissioner Josep Borrell state unequivocally his absolute firm commitment, the firm commitment of the European Union to NATO as the preeminent territorial defense for Europe. And I heard Borrell, again, this is the leader of the European Union.
Yes.
What should be a competing organization just say he just came from the event with President Biden, and that he was encouraged, was Mr. Borrell and the EU delegation and NATO allies by Biden's strong commitment to the solidarity of the alliance, which you alluded to, which includes not just the 32 member states, but also some 35 partner countries.
Yes.
So the alliance itself is in quite strong condition.
In fact, sir, just a few hours ago, Global Times, which is backed by China's Communist Party, has said that the recent hype over the China threat by Western media ahead of the three-day NATO summit and accusations of China supporting Russia once again reveal the US and NATO's intentions to extend their influence into the Asia-Pacific region for geopolitical gain. Do you see any rationality or truth behind this statement?
No, because NATO is concerned with territorial defense of Europe, as Mr. Borrell himself just stated.
Yes.
And the United States has other alliances, including the AUKUS alliance, and works very closely with partners, like very important partners, strategic partners like India, on defense on strategic defense and shared strategic defense in Asia. That includes Japan, includes South Korea, includes Taiwan, includes Australia, and as I mentioned, and also includes India. So the U.S. has other means to engage with collective territorial defense against threats that such as China and its aggression, which India knows well and has seen territorially up close and has experienced. And so the United States has other means and does not need the NATO alliance to go into Asia. That's unnecessary, and no one is calling for that in the alliance.
Well, thank you so much, Edward Joseph, for joining us on the World 24/7. Well, the rise of far-right forces in Europe and the possible return of Donald Trump to the White House have all added uncertainties within NATO to reach consensus on major issues, but all eyes on Washington over the next 48 hours. Meanwhile, the other big story we're tracking, Sheikh Hasina has touched down in China. In fact, she is going to be meeting Xi Jinping today. But as they say, there are no free lunches, and that truism will definitely play out as this meeting takes place. In fact, we are told on the agenda are talks about financial aid for Sheikh Hasina's country, and India will be keenly watching to see if the Teesta project is discussed and Bangladesh and China try to bring a new dimension to it. Do keep in mind that on the heels of this visit, a leading member of the Bangladesh government had said India is a time-tested political friend of Bangladesh, and China is a friend necessary for Bangladesh to attain its developmental goals, summing up his country's balanced diplomacy. Let's turn our attention now to the United Kingdom, where Prime Minister Keir Starmer praised diversity among new MPs as he spoke for the first time in the Commons as Prime Minister, while Rishi Sunak said the Conservatives will take up the role of the official opposition. The two leaders have now swapped sides, with Keir Starmer and his MPs taking their seats on the government benches of the Commons. Mr. Starmer said the new parliament was the most diverse by race and gender this country has ever seen.
Table of the House. First doing so myself.
I do solemnly, sincerely, truly declare and affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty King Charles, his heirs and successors, according to law.
I swear by Almighty God that I will be faithful and bear true.
Well, thank you for investing your time and watching this edition of the World 24/7. We'll keep tracking the latest developments for you. Do stay tuned.